right, demo day 1, February 19th is complete. Just getting the bin picked up here. Thank you everybody for all the help making it happen.
So the first off, you may know that we're already midpoint in our semester. So that means only one thing. Summer is right around the corner. And so as summer is approaching, would you intentionally think about where you could be this upcoming summer? Summer is a great time where we get to just hang out as a church family. It's a bit of a slower pace, which means more room for conversations, relationships, not only for those that you're already being led by, but also invite new people in, and where discipleship can really thrive. There's so many barbecues, so many hangouts that happens all summer, and you really don't want to miss that. So if you have any barriers for the summer, like a house or a job, please talk to your Simple Church leader and post on the Discord housing chat and also resource sharing chat so we can make sure we can come along as a church family, because church, your presence matters, not only for those who are leading you, but those that you get to lead. So again, church, please listen to this. Your presence is so important, so please consider staying this summer. And so the question is, would you stay this summer? Okay, so the second announcement that we have today is on March 19th, from 10 to 12, we are going to be doing a McMaster cleanup day. So this is just after St. Patrick's Day, where we get to just show the campus and the community some love after St. Patrick's Day. This is going to be a phenomenal time for not only for your Simple Church to come join, but also the whole church. The whole church is invited to this, where we get to just come together to really practically serve our campus. So if you're interested in coming on March 19th between 10 and 12 for the McMaster cleanup day, please go to engage.liftchurch.ca to let us know. Again, this is for anyone and everyone within our church family. Just a really great way to just serve together, but then also do it within our church family. Last but not least, we shared this a while ago, and we have a date on the calendar now. So we all know that our stories are so profound, and it can be a tool that we can use to just bring people closer to Jesus. So on March 26th, we are going to have a brunch workshop where we get to just understand how we can use our stories for evangelism. And so this is a date you do not want to miss. March 26th, please go to Engage to let us know who is able to come. But this is just a great way that we get to continue to share the gospel with people who don't yet know him, and how we can use our stories to do so. So again, March 26th, mark that on your calendar, and we're so excited to hear a word from Alex Bush.
That you guys are having a great time in your gathering so far, a great time of worship so far. The past couple of weeks, we have been kind of looking at this topic, if you will, of doing what Jesus did. And so we've been opening up the Word and asking ourselves, essentially, what would Jesus do? Trying to be as practical as we can and just start to practice some of the things of Jesus so that our hearts are molded to be more and more like his. And so today, I want to turn our attention to what I'm going to call habits of forgiveness. Habits of forgiveness. So really, we're going to kind of explore for the next few moments, how can we cultivate hearts of forgiveness and not be poisoned by bitterness, resentment, and anger? How can we do what Jesus did in this way? So we're going to kind of ground our time in just two verses from Luke chapter 6. If you have a Bible and want to follow along there, Luke chapter 6, verses 27 and 28. Luke 6, 27 and 28. Listen to what Jesus says there. He says, "But I say to you who listen, love your enemies. Do what is good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you." Let's pray as we open up the word and ask Jesus to speak to us today. Lord, we thank you so much for these moments we get to share as a family, as your body. Moments of declaring your praise, moments of turning to you in prayer, and moments of humbling ourselves before you and your word. And as we do that again today, Jesus, help us to have hearts that are humble, minds that are quiet, and ears that are attentive and ready to receive what it is you want to say to us. Lord, we thank you in advance for what you're going to teach us and show us about yourself. Lord, we thank you that your word is good and it is alive for us. And so we pray these things expectantly, and we pray them in your name. Amen. Amen. Forgiveness. One of the most, I think, amazing kind of glimpses, pictures of forgiveness is something that Robin mentioned also last week, is the picture of Jesus on the cross. We see it in a few of the Gospels where Jesus has obviously undergone tremendous suffering and just brutal treatment. And yet in some of his final words, with his last few breaths, Jesus cries out, he prays out, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Can you imagine in that moment to have a heart of forgiveness? Like that's a lifetime. That's a lifetime of forgiveness. That's not just in the moment. You can't just drum that up on the spot. That is a heart that is free from any and all bitterness and rage, anger and resentment. What a beautiful picture. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Now, you might also be familiar with a similar story a little while after that in the book of Acts. The early church has begun, and followers of Jesus, the believers, are spreading the gospel. And one of the apostles, a man named Stephen, shares the gospel. He preaches this amazing sermon one day, Acts chapter 8. Unfortunately, some of those who were listening to the message that day did not respond with repentance and humility. The message cut to the heart, and many who were there, instead of repenting, they actually began to stone the apostle Stephen after he finished preaching. And while he was being killed, not unlike Jesus, he cried out, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." And then he said, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." Just like his Savior did. Father, forgive them. Do not hold this sin against them. What amazing forgiveness. Fast forward many years later after both of those events, you might be familiar with the name Elisabeth Elliot. I talked about just a little bit of her story, I guess a few months ago on Leaders Assembly, but of course not everyone will have heard that, and maybe others aren't even familiar with Elisabeth Elliot, but her and her husband Jim were missionaries in Ecuador to a people called the Quechua or the Waorani Indians. And at the time, they had wanted to bring the gospel to this unreached people group, a group that was historically quite a violent people. And them and a number of other missionaries with them had begun to make some initial contact with the local people in that area, the people of the tribe. And things were slow, but they were taking small positive steps. However, everything took a pretty terrible turn on January 8th, 1956. Jim Elliot and four other missionaries, were speared to death on a sandbar called Palm Beach in Ecuador. Elizabeth Elliot and her husband Jim, they had been married for 3 years at that time, and they had a 10-month-old daughter. Now, Elizabeth later interviewed, amazingly, one of the men who had killed her husband. And he said that at the time, they didn't understand exactly who these missionaries were or what they wanted. There was much confusion around the whole situation. They thought, many in the tribe thought, that the missionaries were cannibals and had ill intentions. They just didn't understand. Now you might wonder, what in the world was Elizabeth Elliot doing interviewing this man who had killed her husband and many of her friends? Well, she tells a story that after her husband was killed, she prayed this prayer. Listen to it. She said, "Lord, if there is anything that you want me to do for the Alkas," the name of this tribe, the Alkas, she said, "Lord, I'm available." And he answered that prayer. She continued to tell her story. She said, "I continued to work with the Quechua Indians when, through a remarkable providence, I met 2 Alka women who lived with me for 1 year. They were the key to my going to live with the tribe that had killed the 5 missionaries." And she remained there as a missionary for 2 years. Several years later, she returned to the United States, and she continued to be an influential Christian speaker and an author. Just an amazing woman, amazing life. And she passed away in 2015 at the age of 88, but has an incredible legacy of abiding in Jesus and a testimony, a legacy of forgiveness that's quite obvious. Elizabeth Elliot, a legacy of forgiveness, just like the Apostle Stephen, martyr Stephen, and just like Jesus. So what I want us to think about today is, how might this be possible for you and I too? Were they just special, really, really special? Or is a heart, a legacy of forgiveness, something for all who are followers of Jesus? Unfortunately, I think we're quite familiar with bitterness. We don't really need to define it too much, do we? We are all very familiar with how quickly it can come upon our hearts, the feeling of anger, the feeling of resentment to those who have wronged us in some way. We know how common it can be and how much it can cling to our hearts. Of course, there's lots of different sources, right? Some of you, I know and can imagine, have had very real, very serious wrong done to you. And as a result, you maybe even to this day are continuing to carry quite a bit of pain for the wrong that has been done to you. There are also some more subtle sources that we might not have considered to be all that significant at the time or in the moment, but they have stuck with us. Things like just losing relationships with people that you really cared for a long time, or you feel like you invested a lot of energy into and then they left or you lost the relationship. It can come from things like when people lie or betray us, or even interpersonal conflict, maybe from differing opinions, but it begins to create a bit of a root of bitterness. Sometimes it can be as subtle as maybe a series of well-meaning efforts that just didn't translate. You know, the kind of moments when you're saying, like, I know what you mean or what you're trying to do, but it's not exactly helpful. Please stop. And those moments can start to become roots of bitterness in our hearts, just resentment or anger building up. There are lots of sources, lots of reasons why we may find ourselves feeling bitterness and harboring that and needing to forgive. And I'm sure that we can relate to the experience of that feeling of bitterness being just something that sticks. It can kind of cling. It can often begin to weigh us down. And in large part, that's because bitterness is kind of sneaky. We at times, we really want to hold on to resentment. We want to hold on to anger. Because in a twisted kind of way, we think that if we do that, then it's making the other person who wronged us, it's making them pay. It's some sort of weird kind of justice or revenge. I want to cling to this because it's going to make you feel the same kind of hurt that you've caused to me. However, perhaps you've experienced this. Hanging on to that bitterness only causes a lot of damage, both to the other person and to you. I kind of liken it to a bit of an emotional or a spiritual prison, if you will. Kind of two ways. First, bitterness can be like an inner life prison, in that bitterness can really poison your future with pain from the past. At times it feels right. We think it's right. At times it feels good to hang on to it. But as Tim Keller says, bitterness is like drinking poison, hoping that it will kill the other person. Not only does it not help them, but it slowly imprisons your heart, your future, holding you back from trusting others and cultivating compassion, believing the best in people. It can be a prison on your inner life, your heart, your mind, your emotions. But it can also be a bit of a prison in your outer life, in that bitterness can start to cut you off from relationships. It becomes a bit of a filter through which we see other people and relationships. We can start to think, well, what if it happens again? What if I risk loving someone and serving someone and putting myself out there or caring for people and the same thing happens again? I'm hurt, I'm betrayed, I'm lied to. You start to think, I don't want to do that. I don't want to serve. I don't want to humble myself to care for other people. It becomes a prison on our outer life. And of course, that's why it can seem pretty hopeless at times, right? And it's why bitterness can often tend to win and imprison us. So often, and so many people don't know that there actually is freedom. There is a better way, and it's through forgiveness. Now, talk about forgiveness, and the gospel has incredible, beautiful, life-changing things to say about what forgiveness truly is. But to kind of put it simply for us today, what's forgiveness? It's really favor that cancels. It's favor that cancels. Forgiveness is when I offer grace in order to pardon someone else. Now, according to God's word, forgiveness, real forgiveness is freely given. It's freely done, and therefore it's not based on the merit or even the deservedness of the recipient. Now, of course, the challenge here, and I think what we sometimes will get wrong when we want to give forgiveness or we're being asked to, is that we can think one of two things, kind of two ends of a spectrum, if you will. Sometimes we can think that on the one hand, forgiveness it's all on me. That I have to simply somehow just get over this hurt that was done and somehow then feel an affection towards the person that has wronged me. That's the one hand. It's all on me. The other end, sometimes we can swing to the other side and think, well, it actually has nothing to do with me, and forgiveness is simply an emotion that may or may not ever kind of fall in my lap. And so if it does, great, and I'll forgive. And if it doesn't, well, then it doesn't, and they don't deserve it anyways. And so sometimes we can hear someone talk about forgiveness or hear a message on it, and sometimes get defensive. We can start to think, well, wait a second, why is this on me? You know, at first, I didn't ask for the first prison of the wrong that the person did to me. And that now I have this bitterness of this other prison, of this bitterness that it's resulted in. And now you're telling me that I have this kind of guilt, this task of having to forgive them. It can feel even more of a burden, even more of a weight. And what's happening there is that we're, I think, at times not fully understanding what forgiveness is. We view it as some destination that is outside of the prison that we may or may not ever arrive at someday. But what we see in God's word is that forgiveness isn't a destination outside of prison. It's actually the key that opens us up out of the prison cell. It's an amazing announcement from the good news of Jesus, from the gospel, is that forgiveness is actually, it's freedom, and it is possible. It is possible. Now, how do we know that? How can we confidently say that forgiveness, though often very challenging and not to be treated lightly, how can we know with confidence that it's possible is because ultimately it's about Jesus living his life and his love through us. So think back to the two verses that I read to begin this afternoon from Luke 6. The beginning of that little passage there where Jesus says, love your enemies, that's kind of the encompassing part of this little passage. The practices that we're going to talk about today fall under this bigger umbrella of love your enemies. And when Jesus says love here, he is talking about something very specific. The word, you might have heard this before, maybe some of you many times, the word is agape. It's real love. It's true love. It's God's love towards us. It's not what we often call love, which really isn't, a kind of fleeting emotion or a feeling. But agape is doing what the Lord would do, doing what God prefers. It's defined by God. It's modeled, embodied by God, our Father. To put it another way, agape love is an affection which always involves choice. It's sacrificial. True love isn't just an emotion that may or may not come to us. It's a step of obedience at times. It's a decision. It's a commitment. True agape love is when we actually allow Jesus to continue to live through us, his life and his love towards other people. And that's why this is so freeing when we start to walk it out with him. It's why it's good news. Forgiveness is actually possible. Because what it is an ongoing heart change within us that Jesus can produce, that he can actually do within us as we walk with him and as we practice some different habits we'll talk about in a minute. Forgiveness is possible. Let me say a couple more quick things on what it is, and then we'll get into these practical kind of heart practices, if you will. It's really important that we keep in mind that when we talk about forgiveness, we're talking about something that is granted or given before it's felt. Not always, but often. Forgiveness is granted before it's felt. In other words, it's not a matter of, well, you just have to get over it and then you can forgive them. No, it's a step of faith. It's a step of faith in our God. Rather than having to wait for our emotions to lead us, we can actually go in the direction of our forgiving God. But we also need to keep in mind here that justice and forgiveness are often separate. In other words, forgiveness isn't saying, okay, yeah, you're right, never mind, what you did wasn't wrong or didn't hurt me. No, we can acknowledge the wrong, and we need to acknowledge the wrong. The other person may need to go through a very appropriate consequences for what was done. And yet, at the same time, you can also forgive them. What forgiveness means here is that you're not going to relationally hold it over them forever. But they may still need to go through the appropriate consequences of what happened. Yes, there's a process, and often a long one. But what I want to invite us to as we talk about practicing it is, can we commit to the journey of forgiving? Can we commit to the journey of reconciliation, even if it might take a while? So I want to share three kind of practices with us, practices of the heart, if you will. And the idea is that hopefully they start to become kind of the way of our heart. They just become second nature. And maybe a helpful frame today is to kind of think about them as unleashing good things on those who have wronged us. Unleashing good things, even counterintuitively. So maybe when your flesh says, no, withhold good from them. They hurt you. Don't give them anything good. When Jesus says, love your enemies, he's actually saying, no, do the opposite. Unleash good things on them and allow the practices to start to form our hearts in the way of forgiveness. So 3 practices to share today. Here's number 1, unleash thoughtfulness. Unleash thoughtfulness. Look again back at verse 27 of Luke 6 there. Jesus says, love your enemies, and then he says, and do good, do what is good to those who hate you. Do what is good to those who hate you. Now hate is a strong word, and maybe doesn't quite encompass all that is being implied here. Because maybe you're thinking, I don't know that I have many people in my life that hate me. Perhaps you don't think that you do. Maybe you actually don't. And maybe you don't in the normal sense of the word hate. But there's something even, I think, a little bit more subtle and deeper going on here. And let's even speak really specifically right now of our relationships with our brothers and sisters in Christ. So like our church family relationships here. The word that Jesus uses here for hate is actually defined as to detest something on a comparative basis. To detest on a comparative basis. So what he means is to kind of love someone more than someone else. To pick, one choice over another. So that's getting a little bit more nuanced than just like outright kind of hatred. So example, maybe you've been starting to feel yourself grow in bitterness because you don't feel like someone hates you, but you feel like your relationship with them has changed. That maybe they are starting to like someone else more, spending more time with them more. Your friendship circle has changed, or maybe you invested in someone and now they've left and your worlds are a bit more separate, and maybe that's caused some resentment, some bitterness. It can be as subtle as a changing of friendship or relationship. Sometimes, even especially within the family of God, we can feel or perceive a kind of division between us and somebody else. And there's no real conflict. It's just that maybe we're not like naturally kind of best friends or buddy-buddy. That's okay. In fact, the beautiful thing about the blood of Jesus is that he's united us as brothers and sisters. And it's not based on our natural personalities or those that we would even normally kind of gravitate towards. No, we have been united as family because of what Jesus has done. It's the beauty of the gospel. We're family, not just with those who are exactly like us or who those we easily click with, but with everyone. So it's really important that we don't allow what we might think is like, oh, we're different, to become like conflict or distancing or even bitterness. Instead, practice this way of the heart, practice this way of forgiveness by continually unleashing thoughtfulness. That is, giving freely to those who you aren't super close with. Giving freely to those who maybe you've even had conflict with, or you're in the middle of conflict with. Church, the beautiful thing about like this journey with Jesus is that you can do thoughtful things. You can do good things for people while your heart heals towards them. Often our emotions follow our actions and our decisions. So this is a really tactile one, or like a really, really practical one. Jesus is saying, do good, do what is good to those who hate you. Do something kind. Do something thoughtful. And make that the way of your heart, the practice of your heart. What is that? I mean, that could be any number of things, but just to get you thinking really practically. Food is a great one. Food is always thoughtful, right? Make someone food, make them food, make a little bit extra, and then go share it with them. Hey, I thought you might like this. We made a bit extra. I thought it might help you out this week. Make food. Another one is lend a hand with something that they need help with. Because we naturally do this with those that we're already close with, right? But what if you were to kind of get your radar out and try to respond when you see a need pop up? Respond to those that you aren't super close with, or maybe you even feel a bit distant from, or maybe you've been in some conflict with. What if you were to intentionally go and say, hey, I could help you out with that. I could give you a ride. I could pick that up for you. I could lend you a hand. You see, we might think, well, it's just a small task and anyone can help them with that. So why would I kind of head into the feeling of distance or conflict to help there? But it's less about getting the task done often. Anyone could help and get it done, but maybe no one else would have the same kind of meaningful impact as if you were offering to help. Unleash thoughtfulness. Lend a hand. Maybe you can share a gift or buy them a gift that's related to their hobby. This is getting really thoughtful now, right? Because maybe like in general, anyone would appreciate food or anyone would appreciate a hand, but this is really where thoughtfulness can come into play. Find out what they're really interested in. You say, I don't get it, but they're really interested in this. I thought you would like this. I saw it and I thought of you and I picked it up for you. Unleash thoughtfulness. Do good to those who hate you, whether that's in the kind of formal traditional sense of the word or in the more nuanced sense as we talked about. Unleash thoughtfulness. Do good to those who hate you. Secondly, we can unleash encouragement. Unleash encouragement. Verse 28, Jesus says, bless those who curse you. Bless those who curse you. What he's talking about here is in blessing is really to speak that which gives a benefit, to confer on someone what would be beneficial and life-giving. So church, let's be reminded for a minute of just how powerful our words are. And let's think about it in the positive for a minute. You can lift someone up. We know this, right? You can significantly lift someone up, even from often the pit of despair and emotional wrestling. You can lift them up with a word of encouragement, recognition. I'm sure you've been there. I hope you've been there. Or kind of out of the blue, someone stops to tell you something meaningful or to thank you, to notice you. It makes your day. It makes your week often. We can use our life-giving and encouraging words for, yes, those we already are in relationship with and those we care about. But Jesus is saying here, use your life-giving words, use encouragement as a way to attack the root of bitterness, as a way of forgiveness, as a practice of the heart. So maybe you're in a place where you're saying, I'm not quite at the place yet of fully being at forgiveness. But along the way, here's what I can do. I can bless them with my words. Unleash blessing. Unleash blessing on those who have or who are cursing you. Now, that could be someone who is, for some reason, really wanting to bring you down. Bless them with your words. Don't stoop down to return the cursing, but actually rise above and practice the way of Jesus. Bless them with your words. It could be just simply someone who doesn't understand your world and they're even unintentionally being really discouraging to you. Bless them with your words. How? Two ways. Firstly, unleash life-giving words about them. This is really important. We need to be so mindful of how we speak of others when they're not around. Gossip is often masked as I'm venting, I'm getting something off my chest, or I'm joking. But it's just as harmful said about them as it is to them. On the flip side, there is so much power in speaking positively about someone to a third party. Maybe that person has been frustrating you. Maybe you don't understand each other. Maybe they've even really done something rather hurtful. That can be true, and we need to acknowledge the wrong. But at the same time, you can say life-giving things about them. For example, if they are a brother and sister in Christ, that right there, they are my brother and sister. Regardless of whether or not they're in the family, our family, or not, everybody is a beautiful image bearer of God. That is something I can say nice about them. Say something that is life-giving about them, a quality that you do recognize and appreciate and value. There is always something beneficial to speak about that person along the way of forgiveness. But then also unleash life-giving words to them. Actually, if you say something about them that's really nice, also tell them. Take notice to say something meaningful, to share maybe an impactful memory that you've had together. Share something that maybe everyone kind of thinks it, but no one really celebrates it. No one really honors the person. Sometimes we take things for granted and we don't actually stop and say, you know what, I just really want to encourage you. I want to thank you for this. Like, it's just so expected now that you are this way and you do this thing that no one ever takes time to acknowledge it. And so I want to do that. Just use your life-giving words to bless others. Say it to them. Unleash encouragement, both about and to. And finally, thirdly, we can unleash prayer. Again, the end of verse 28 there, Jesus says, and pray for those. Robin talked about this last week a little bit. Pray for those who mistreat you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Isn't it an amazing, powerful thought to think that we can pray on behalf of those that don't even know we're praying for them? We talked about it in the intercession prayer or advocating for other people. How powerful to think that we can stand in the gap, if you will, and bring in prayer those that have no idea we're praying for them, even those that might be surprised to hear that. Those who have wronged us, those that we are in conflict with, to stand in the gap and say, Lord, would you bless them? This is part of the Elizabeth Elliot and other missionary stories. So one of the other missionaries was a man named Nate Saint, and his son Steve has had an amazing ministry as well. Listen to what Steve Saint, the son, said about kind of the days and years after his father was killed. He said, after my dad and the other men died, my mom continued praying for the people who killed them. By the time I met them, he said, I wasn't thinking of them as the people who killed my father. I was thinking of them as being the most special people in the world. I had a heritage of forgiveness from my parents and from the other 4 widows. Isn't that amazing? Perhaps you have experienced that bitterness can be generational. Well, so can forgiveness. Pray for those who mistreat you. How? Ask the Lord to bless them. Like Robin shared last week. Start to say it out loud. Be specific. Lord Jesus, bless them in their school. Bless them in their health. Lord, bless their family. Bless their finances. Jesus, would you protect them? Would you care for them? Ask the Lord to bless them. But we can also pray in a way where we're asking God to shape our hearts towards them. We can pray that, and we should pray that regularly. Jesus, mold my heart towards this person. Naturally, in my hurt and in my pain, I feel a certain way, but Lord, would you shape my heart towards them? Help me see them with different eyes. Help me see them the way you see them. And when we don't know how to pray, just ask him, Lord, help me to pray. Show me how to pray. Teach me how to pray for them right now. We can unleash thoughtfulness, encouragement, and we can unleash prayer. The habits of forgiveness. Church, I think often the reason that forgiveness feels so difficult at times is because we only think of it as the end kind of emotional feeling, like, I've arrived, I've now forgiven them. When in reality, forgiveness is the whole journey, it's the whole process. It's every step in that direction. When we're hurt, when we've been wronged, it's kind of like we're limping a little bit, emotionally limping. And if you've ever had to walk with a limp or walk with crutches, go upstairs in particular, you know that you can do it. It just takes a little longer than normal. You have to stop at every step. And I think forgiveness is often a lot like that. It's like limping up the stairs. It's one step at a time. It's a step of faith. It's a step of dependence on the Lord, saying, Jesus, help me do this. It's a step of obedience. And maybe for a time you have to wait on that step for a little bit before you continue on. But you're heading in the right direction. And the beautiful thing about the gospel is that in this journey of kind of limping up the stairs, if you will, in this journey of forgiveness, the beautiful thing is that you are both the giver of forgiveness and the recipient of it. And so when we feel stuck thinking, how in the world am I supposed to give this kind of pardon, this kind of love to someone who's wronged me? We should almost immediately then be led to think of the pardon that we ourselves have received from the Father. And this is why, though forgiveness can be very difficult and can take a long time, why it is possible. Because it is giving to others what we ourselves have received from God in Christ. Listen to Ephesians 4, verse 32. Paul says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another just as God also forgave you in Christ. You see, church, often we hang on to bitterness, we hang on to resentment because we want to imprison the other person who wronged us. And we want to do that because we think that it was their wrong to us that imprisoned us in the first place. But I believe what Scripture says is it's actually our own guilt before God that is the greater prison. And so forgiveness is releasing the one who has wronged us, who owes us. Why? Because we ourselves realize that we have been released from our sin against God. And therefore, we don't need to hold them imprisoned anymore. Psalm 103, verse 10 says, God has not dealt with us as our sins deserve, or repaid us according to our iniquities, our sin. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his faithful love towards those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgression, our sin from us. You see, had God waited for some feel-good emotion to lead, we would never have been given his son, Jesus, because forgiveness is granted before it's felt. Had he only given Jesus to those who were deserving, those who were even in the ballpark of his holiness, Jesus would have never left the throne of heaven. Forgiveness is sacrificial. So, church, as you limp up the stairs and you pause on the step, at times thinking, I don't know if I can go any further. I don't know if I can give this. I don't know if I can release them for what they've done. It's the perfect spot to stop and say, but I do know what I have received. The reason that you are even able to take any steps in the direction of forgiveness away from bitterness is because you yourself are free from the prison of your own guilt and shame before God in Christ. When I was learning a little bit more about Elizabeth and Jim Elliot's story, I found something very interesting. She taught on a lot of topics, including forgiveness. She was an amazing speaker and teacher, but I couldn't find much where she explicitly talked about forgiving those who killed her husband. I couldn't find much where she kind of, shared a testimony or a lecture on specifically that forgiveness. Now, she certainly did forgive them, but it didn't appear that forgiveness was something that was outside of her normal Christian life, outside of her relationship with Christ. It was all embedded. She spoke more specifically of abiding in Jesus, of her walk with Christ. And that's my prayer for us as well, that as we practice these habits of forgiveness, that we would simply be able to walk up this journey of giving what we have received in Christ. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for what Romans 5:8 says, that while we were still sinners, while we were your enemies, you took the initiative and you sent Jesus, that he died in our place to offer forgiveness for our own sin, to free us from that prison of guilt and shame. Lord, we know that those who have they've surrendered their life to Jesus, we know that we ourselves have been freed from that. We ourselves are the recipients of the greatest forgiveness we'll ever know. Lord, I pray that as we then look to walk out this sometimes quite difficult and long journey of forgiving others, I pray, Lord, that it would every day, every moment be grounded in the love that you first have given to us. And I pray that we would see it as a step of faith, a journey with you. I pray that we would entrust our hearts to you. I pray that we would have the humility to ask you to continue to shape our hearts. And as we practice these small but important kind of habits of the heart, I pray, Lord, that you would free us from anger. You would free us from resentment. You would free us from bitterness. Allow us to forgive. Jesus, that's who you are. That's what you've done for us. I pray, Lord, even in this moment, for those who have been thinking of names and events and people, Jesus, would you speak so clearly? Help them to know that because of you and your love, forgiveness is possible, and it's a freedom of the heart. So, Lord, would you walk with us as we go and practice these habits of the heart, Jesus, and would you continue to change our hearts as we do? We pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen. All right, guys, I'm going to send things back over to your Simple Church regional director and in your gathering. I hope that you have a great post-gathering hangout, potluck, whatever it may be. Be blessed, and we will talk to you guys soon.